Hi, I want to talk to you about another key skill that outstanding advocates have mastered. Now, when I ask advocates about advocacy roles, lots of people say, well, my job is to provide information. And I think that they're right if you want to be a good advocate. I think an outstanding advocate, however, changes the emphasis. So instead of providing information, they ask questions. But they don't ask any questions, they ask the right questions. So that's what I want to talk to you about now, is about the skill of asking the right questions. And I'll give you an example. I have a 2.5-year-old, and I quickly learned at bedtime that the stupid question to ask is, do you want to go to bed? Invariably, he would say, no. Now I ask, do you want mummy to take you to bed, or do you want daddy to take you to bed? That's a much better question. And it's interesting because it's so simple, but in advocacy, we need to ask better questions. Now, there are two types of people, two groups of people you will ask questions to: clients and professionals or decision makers. So let's start thinking about the questions you ask to your clients and if they're clever questions or if they're stupid questions. To me, questions are crucial because they really help the client work out what it is they want to say and the order they want to say things in. In your listening relationship, you will be given the client that safe space to explore what's important. Now, often people need to be prompted to work that out. They're not just going to know instantly what it is. They're going to need some support. So you need to ask the right questions. Now, for me, bad questions start with the word why. Why do you want this? I think it's a bad question. The person's going to go off on a tangent, it may be very emotional, it might be very distressing. A better question is going to be what or when. So for me, a good question will be, what will change if we get this outcome? Because that's the feeling or the outcome that the person wants. It might not be the decision, they might be after something else. And you know that that's true because in our own lives, we often say we want something and then we get it, and then we're still left dissatisfied because it wasn't really what we wanted, it's something else. So by focusing on things like what will change as a result of this outcome, we're more likely to get to the real truth of what the client's feeling. Let me give you an example. I worked with a young person once who said to me, I want to leave care. I want to discharge myself from care, fed up, hate being in care, hate it. Now she was 16. I'm sitting there as an advocate. I have information that's useful and relevant, such as I know she has a legal right to discharge herself from care. I know the process. I could have told her all of that. But yeah, I felt instead of me giving her the information, it'd be better for me to work out, well, what is it that she wants to change? What does she want to happen? What's the real reason for this? So by asking those questions, I was able to find out that there were certain things that she hated more than living in care, which were the lack of respect, the lack of independence, and what exactly she meant by that. So bedtimes were quite punitive. It was like 8:30 for a 16-year-old. So we were able to then really be specific about what she wanted to happen. Ability to go out and have some freedom was another area for her. And what was interesting is by working through those smaller things, we changed the outcome, which wasn't to discharge myself from care. It was to get more independence. But if I'd have concentrated on the discharge from care issue by giving her information, we could have done that and we'd have gone off on that path. But by asking questions to get to the root of what it was she wanted to change, we were able to get to her truth and to more effectively advocate with her. So think about the clients you work with. What questions do you ask to get to their truth? Do you just take at face value what it is that the person's saying? And that might be okay. That might be okay. But how do you try and unpick what it is that they're saying through asking questions? I also think asking questions keeps us safer in terms of trying to avoid giving our personal view. So with that young person I mentioned there, when she said, I want to discharge myself from care, my immediate thought was, oh, please don't. Please don't discharge yourself from care because you'll be unsupported. You might end up homeless. You might go into prostitution. There were all these things running through my mind in a second about what her outcomes are going to be. Now, I could have gone down the path then of giving consequences of, well, what's going to happen if you leave care, to try and persuade her basically not to make that choice. And lots of advocates make that mistake, and I still have to be wary that I don't give information under the guise of persuading. So a classic example is the person has 3 options: stop, start or change the medication. I spend 15 minutes on option A, 3 minutes on option B and 40 minutes on option C. Well, I've gone through the options where I'm given a clear message about which option I think that they should do. So providing information, I think, is something we need to be quite careful about, and outstanding advocates are more likely to ask questions. So to give you an example, if a patient wants to come off the medication or says to you, the doctor said they think I should go on to ECT, what should I do? What is it? A good advocate might explain what ECT is. A good advocate might signpost them. But an outstanding advocate is going to ask some really good questions about, well, what do you know about ECT? Who can we talk to? What can I do to help you find out that information? So those questions are going to be much, much more empowering and have a longer lasting impact on just giving the information. So I want you to think carefully about how you use questions in your advocacy relationship with the client. Now, the second group of people I mentioned you're going to ask questions to are professionals and decision makers, either when you're putting forward and requesting things on behalf of the client or in challenging decisions and raising concerns. Now, something that we need to get really good at is about pre-framing professionals. So a bit like I gave the example of my young son, who's 2.5. When do you want to go to bed? No. Do you want mummy or daddy to take you to bed? I'm pre-framing him by saying, you're going to bed, but do you want mummy or daddy to take you? So that's me pre-framing him about you going to bed. So we need to use the same tact, same approach with professionals. Instead of saying things like, is it possible to change medication? Which is a yes/no answer. A better question might be, when can we review this medication? Or when will the medication be reviewed? Instead of saying, is it possible to have contact with this person? I might ask a better question of, when is it possible to have contact? I'm pre-framing that contact will be looked at rather than the first question, which is asking for contact to be looked at. So can you see the subtle difference, which feels very, well, different about the quality of your questions that you're going to be asking professionals? So when you're asking questions to professionals, I want you to think about your style. If I think back to where advocacy started, there were a lot of angry anarchists. And I remember talking to a colleague, a friend of mine, who reflected on that that's what it used to be like. It used to be a lot of left-wing anarchists going around challenging the system. It was very raw, it was very real. It was fight the system really and let's change it. Very lefty, you know, that approach. And we were talking about that, and he was right, that that's what advocacy used to be. And some parts of the sector is, but on the whole, it's kind of swung now to what he described as compliant conformists. And I found that really interesting because as an assessor, I go around and I have the privilege of meeting lots of advocates and seeing them in their practice. And lots of them are very compliant and conform to what decision makers say. Now, which are you on that scale? Are you an angry anarchist or are you a compliant conformist? Where are you on that scale? Because I think you want to have a bit of both, to be honest. You don't want to be, you know, compliant all the time. You do want to be challenging, but at the same time, you don't want to be challenging for challenge sake. But as a service, I get worried sometimes when I go to assess people and there haven't been any serious challenges for 6 months. And we might have a conversation about, well, when was the last complaint you put in? And people look at me blankly. Or what was the last decision you changed or you overturned? Well, we haven't. Now, there may be a case that there simply wasn't any need to, but my instinct tells me that's probably not the truth. The truth is probably that the service is accepting too much of the local authority and the PCTs or health, NHS decisions. So think about how you can bridge those two together so that you're not either extreme, but that you're able to draw on one another. Because if advocacy isn't challenging, if you're too much of the conformist, then we're losing something of what advocacy means. So to summarise, think carefully about clever questions, because outstanding advocates know that the quality of the answers they get back are wholly dependent on the quality of questions they're going to be asking.